this is Rex from universalexports.co, bringing you a fortnightly podcast called A Story to Tell. In this series, we hear from an eclectic group of people whose only connection is through being a member of the Camberwell Patong Club. By research, gentle prodding, and sometimes coercion, these guests unfold a labyrinth of achievements, disappointments, and surprises. You may be inspired, shocked, or even doubtful, but you will be enthralled. And your turn is coming, so get ready for that tap on the shoulder because everyone has a story to tell. Hey, it's Saturday. The Logies, Carols by Candlelight, Australia's Got Talent, Family Feud, The Don Lane Show, X Factor, and The Einstein Factor. They're all household names, and so is Pam Barnes. For more than 40 years, television producer and award-winning stalwart of the industry, Pam has worked on so many television programs as executive producer and producer that she can't remember them all. After leaving school at the end of Year 11, her first job was at George Patterson Advertising and ended up writing live ads for Graham Kennedy. Pam was given the job as coordinator of live commercials for the show in Melbourne Tonight. It wasn't easy with hosts like Graham and Bert. Her reputation for building teams of people and nurturing people on their way up has long encouraged women in television and their roles. Pam was honoured with a Lifetime Achievement Award in 2017 by the Screen Producers Australia Association, and the late Michael Gudinski presented Pam with an award in sincere appreciation of her outstanding support for Australian music. It holds pride of place in her home. Sony Music presented Pam with an award in appreciation of her outstanding support for Australian artists, and Warner Music made a presentation to her in recognition of her outstanding contribution to the Australian music industry. Pam is also the recipient of the Vita Goldstein Award and has 2 Logie Awards, the most popular Australian program to the Don Lane Show in 1974, and the Logie Award for the Best Entertainment Program awarded to The Circle in 2011. After an extraordinary career on The Box, Pam now spends time with her fabulous daughters, Megan and Catherine, and her 4 loving grandchildren, Edie, Pippa, Gracie, and Charlie. Hi Pam, thanks very much for coming in today. It's a pleasure to have you in our studios here. This is going to be a lot of fun.
Well, thank you, Rex. I'm looking forward to having a chat with you and hoping that we have some fun.
I'm sure we will. After all that introduction, that spans about 40 years. Mm-hmm. Was it fun?
Absolutely. The best part was every day was different. There was no 2 days that were ever the same, and that kept it fun because it was always expect the unexpected sort of thing.
Was it fun when you're 38 minutes into a show, your main guest hasn't turned up, or worse, your main guest turns up totally inebriated? It's live television. That's got to be stress. That's not fun.
Yeah.
Did that happen?
Yes, we had some occasions where that sort of thing happened. Live television is exactly what it is. It's live. You just have to deal with whatever comes along.
And how do you deal with that?
Well, I think you just got to be sort of steely and think very quickly about how you can get around that, how you can change something and manipulate the rundown and let everybody know what's going on, because when it's live, it's absolutely live.
One of the main credentials to your job would be you must be a people person with strong authoritative attributes.
Yes, that would be correct.
I wouldn't want to stand in your way when you've got a show going.
Not when I've got a mission.
Well, Pam, I did want to ask, what actually is a producer?
What's a producer do? From the shows that I worked on, the producer is the one that makes it all lined up, ready to go. So when it's a live show, for instance, you have to organise the intro, the opening remarks, who the first guest is, what time you go to the commercial break, what the next segment is, all of those sort of things, and it's all live and it's all happening. So when I did Hey Hey, for instance, for years, we had a 2-hour live show with a 2-page rundown. That's all it was. You would have the date, the show number. You'd have number 1 would be opening titles, music. Then there'd be opening remarks, and then you'd write 5 minutes against that. After that, you'd go through to a break, and then you'd go to commercial break. In the commercial break, you'd run around like a mad lunatic, making sure that everything is ready for the next segment, etc., etc. So the job I did for Hey Hey It's Saturday, for instance, was that I organised all of the segments, all of the live talent, all of the ads, all of the music, all of everything. But everybody contributed.
So everyone thinks the director has a big job, but it sounds to me like he's just cruising because you as a producer make it happen.
Well, that's right. The difference between a producer and director, the director sort of calls the cameras and follows the bouncing ball sort of thing. Director cuts all the cameras together.
Right.
And makes it, is what you see is what you get.
But you've got the power.
Yes, well, there was a lot of power to
because if they didn't know what you did, then the show wouldn't happen.
Correct.
So I hope you received this appropriate amount of respect from all of these.
Mostly, yeah. Some people didn't, because some people didn't respect a female as much as they would of a man.
And you did that for Hey Hey, for instance, for 42 weeks of the year.
Correct.
For many, many years.
Many years, yeah.
You're saying people may or may not respect the position that you held. You would also have to deal with people's egos. And when you're dealing with people of the entertainment industry, well, I would have believed egos would be main.
You would believe that correctly. There was a lot of egos involved.
That must be very difficult to deal with.
It was difficult, but I've never let anyone intimidate me in that way work-wise. There's a job to be done. I know what the job is. I'm in charge while we're making that show. And
they must certainly realise that if they didn't do as you were organising, then that can reflect badly on them and their career.
Yes, exactly.
We started to talk about producers and executive producers, Pam. We didn't actually distinguish what the difference is between a producer and an executive producer.
Let me say that the difference is different for different production companies, different networks. I'm talking television at the moment. I was producer of Hey Hey It's Saturday for 10 years, but Daryl Summers was the executive producer because it was a Summers Carroll production, so he took the title of executive producer, and rightly so, because they were the ones that did the negotiation with the network, etc., etc. I was the one who did the nuts and bolts and put everything together.
Right, so they have the sort of the concept and present it to whoever's going to back them in putting it together. You as a producer make it happen.
Correct. For Hey Hey, that was that situation. I've been producer of many, many shows, and I've been executive producer of many, many shows too. Sort of depends on who you are and what the show is. I was executive producer of Family Feud with Bert Newton and with Grant Denyer years later, and I worked for a production company who put that together. So sort of swings and roundabouts, so there's not a definite line of this is what the producer does and this is what the executive producer does. An executive producer has to be across the whole thing. Mind you, so does a producer, but it's as clear as mud, isn't it? In other shows, could be that the executive producer is more about the money. In a film situation, usually the executive producers are the ones that get the finance.
Thank you for clearing that up, Pam. But obviously that applies primarily to film production.
Mostly, yes, in general sort of terms. In drama, it's more that than entertainment. It's.
Thank you, Pam. I think you've really clearly explained now the difference between a producer and executive producer, both in television and film and drama now. What about stage shows? Is that something different again?
It is different again, and not my area of expertise at all, but you have somebody like John Frost or Michael Koppel, and they're probably the biggest stage producers in this country. They would be the ones that do the deals with people who own the shows and, bring it to Australia, and they're the ones that put up the money.
Thank you, Pam.
Pleasure,
I
Max.
feel educated.
Enlightened?
Enlightened is
Enlightened,
the word.
yes.
Thanks, Pam. Yeah, I feel enlightened now. You left school at year 11 and became a receptionist and trainee advertising writer for one of the larger advertising agencies. Was there a lot of competition to get that job?
I don't think so. To be honest, I don't know. It was advertised in the Herald Sun, receptionist, telephonist, and they had a number to ring, and I rang up. I didn't have anything like a CV or anything. It was my first sort of proper job. And I went and saw a lady called Miss Taunton at George Patterson Advertising, and she was very impressed that I went to Corowa Church of England Girls Grammar School, and I got the job. I don't know whether I got it because I went to Corowa or whether she liked me or whether she thought I had some talent or whatever, but...
And within a short period of time, you're actually writing ads. They got really good value out of you. They hired you as a receptionist, but you end up being the main ad writer.
Well, I was the relieving telephonist as well. So I got to open the switchboard early every morning and used to relieve on that for when the real person went to lunch. And then I was friends with one of the writers. He encouraged me, and so I wrote a lot of ads and they got approved. And I thought that's really where I wanted to go, was to be a writer, but then... not so.
And there's no schooling for writers, and probably there's no schooling for a producer.
Well, there is now, but there wasn't then.
Right.
So everything was just learn on the job.
And back then, that must have been a battle all the way through, and you were actually breaking glass ceilings and stepping over the line. Did you find animosity, resentment, or even jealousies?
I didn't. To be honest. Well, when I was at George Patterson's, mostly the men were the account executives or the head of all the writers or anything like that. So it was hard to sort of break into that. But I think that I sort of made friends with people along the way. I don't think I was a threat to anybody at that point. And so I was lucky that people nurtured me.
As you said, you had a writer there that really helped you along the way a little bit. Did you have a main mentor once you got into the television industry?
There were a number of people at Channel 9 when I first started there. There was a guy called Gary Stewart who I'd say was probably my mentor.
He was in the industry?
Yeah, definitely. When I first went to Channel 9, the job I had when I first got there, when I was temporary for a month, was looking after the live commercials and things on IMT. Gary was the one who took me under his wing and probably nurtured me to get into proper producing and production, because he could see that I had the potential, I guess. He was a lovely man. He was very nice to me. I finished at George Patterson Advertising because I got a job with Crawford Productions. That was assistant to the producer and director of one of their police drama series. So I said goodbye to George Patterson people.
And this is without any experience?
Correct, and vaguely familiar to terms of what I had done. I ended up ringing up Crawford Productions saying, what day do I actually start? Because it was going to be after Easter. I didn't know if it was a Tuesday or the Wednesday. Oh, we've given that job to a man. I went, I beg your pardon. You've what? And I was devastated because I'd already resigned. The people at George Patterson said, oh, don't go, stay, it doesn't matter, you can stay. And I said, oh, no, I've made up my mind, I'm going. And I got a job temporarily at Channel 9 for a month. The temporary job was helping a man who was very bad at the job, sort of organise all the live commercials and things for IMT.
Oh, right, yep.
At the end of a month, when I'd actually done his job for him because he went to lunch every day. At the end of the month, I went to the head of sales. That was the area that I was under at the time. And I said to him, what happens now? And he said, oh, you could be here for the rest of your life. And I went, oh, okay. So does that mean I'm staying? And he said, yep. So I stayed and stayed there for years.
And in those years, you came across a lot of different kinds of work, from the Hey Heys to the other things like that bicentenary. To me, that really stands out. you had 70 locations to coordinate, get it all together. You were dealing with multiple networks too, I think.
We were, yes.
I would have thought that might be up there as one of your greatest achievements, because I would think there's an awful lot of work in
Yeah, it was a huge amount of work. I had just come back from living in Queensland. My marriage had fallen over and I had come back to Melbourne. I'd been offered the job of coordinating this bicentennial show. So we moved in with Mum and Dad, me and two girls. Then away we went trying to organise this show. Peter Feynman was very famous at the time as producer and director, and so it was his vision, and it was a snapshot of Australia at the beginning of the bicentennial, 70 live locations, everything from New York to a spaceship, a rocket. No, it was a satellite. What was a spaceship?
It was a
space station, that's the one. How quickly you forget. It was years ago. It was everything. So my job was to coordinate it all, and we had to do all of these surveys during the year to work out, what was there and how it could be done, etc., etc. So every time we went on a survey, there would be somebody from Channel 9, somebody from the ABC, somebody from AUSAT, somebody from Telecom. So the producers came up with ideas of, let's do this, and then all these other people would have to go and work out technically how that could happen. And so my job was to get everybody to all of these locations.
You were the senior producer?
No, I was the senior coordinator.
Right. So you're dealing with producers from each of these
correct.
different organisations.
It was massive. I can remember sitting up in my parents' lounge room at a card table every night with a typewriter typing out itineraries and, all this sort of thing. It was before emails. It was before fax. Faxes had just started, and I could not believe this. Oh my goodness, you just put a piece of paper in here and it comes out the other end with words on it. It was amazing. It was the most unbelievable job in terms of hours and effort, and just, it was extraordinary. It really was extraordinary. And most of it was done on the phone with people. You'd be ringing, Cooper Petey or something or other and trying to organise something or other. And it was all done on trust, because there was no emails to sort of say, Fred Nurk will be there tomorrow morning or sort of whatever. So it was pretty well done on trust, and that these people would all turn up and you would do whatever. It was madness, to be honest.
I would say that's one of your greatest achievements.
I completely agree. It was extraordinary.
You were saying how busy that was. Your whole life involved in the industry is very, very busy. How did you fit in having a family and looking after the family? And you worked odd hours, not just long hours.
Correct. All of that was a big challenge. In fact, there are times when I actually cannot remember what I did with my children, which is a terrible admission. But it would be when we were doing Hey Hey, I'd be at netball on a Saturday morning, and I would have to leave the girls there to be, and obviously I looked after who was going to pick them up and take them places and, all the rest of it. But, there were times when I got actually no idea how I did half of it. I've got no memory of it, but I know it was organised well.
I was going to say, the skills of a producer, the skills of looking after the family. But it's not just the long hours, but the diversity of hours. It was hard. It was very hard. And it was hard when I came back and was doing the bicentennial show. That was just so many hours, and thank God for my parents, because I couldn't have done it without people like that. Was there any other program that you found to be extremely difficult?
Well, there was quite a number in the difficult department, but a couple that come to mind were when we did Hey Hey at Saturday from Warner Brothers Studios in Hollywood in 1996. We did 2 shows from there, and we thought that we would have the help of Warner Brothers to deliver guests and things like that, which turned out not to be the case. We did have someone working for us to help us get guests, but literally to do 2 shows, we didn't quite have enough guests. So I could be seen running around the Warner Brothers lot accosting people that looked vaguely famous and asking them if they'd like to come and appear on this show that we were doing for Australia, and trying to explain the show, which they'd never heard of, etc. So apart from, almost being arrested by the Warner Brothers police, the degree of difficulty of that show was quite something. But it was great fun, and they were very successful as it turned out, but it was very stressful. And to try and get Red Faces acts for that show was another challenge. So we went to a place called Venice Beach, amazing sort of strip of beach that's got this big promenade sort of thing, and all these people there sort of doing juggling and singing and God knows what on earth they were doing. And I was literally going up and accosting them and asking them if they'd like to come on this Australian show. And I think we paid them like a minimal amount, because we're never very good at paying people, including me. Those two shows were quite challenging, needless to say.
And did they understand the concept of Red Faces?
Well, they were bewildered, put it that way. Mind you, so were the guests. Do you remember Murphy Brown's show?
Oh, yes.
So there was a character in that show called Corky.
Yep.
We ended up having her as the wheel girl for the, the pluck a wheel sort of thing. And one of the very famous clips that came out of that show was her going, "Where am I? What am I doing here? I don't understand." It was hilarious. It was very funny. Anyway, that's just...
You have received lots of awards. Here are two of them here. Gee, these logies are big and heavy.
Yeah, it's nice being recognised.
Right.
It is very nice.
Which of those industry awards do you hold nearest to you?
I've got 4 Logies of my own, and they mean a lot to me because they represent a lot of hard work and over different shows too. So, funnily enough, I worked on Hey Hey for Donkey Jonks. I don't have a Logie from that because Daryl's got them all.
Sure.
I was actually got one from Family Feud and from the Don Lane show. Don and Peter Feynman gave me that one in recognition of the amount of work that I put into it, and Family Feud, and what else have I got? In terms of satisfaction, one of the things that really was very satisfying to me was to win the Logie for The Circle, which was a morning program on Channel 10, and it was sort of followed on after Bert's GMA finished. Channel 10 asked me to develop a new morning show.
Right.
And it was along the lines of GMA with Bert Newton. And we got Chrissy Swan, Georgie Coughlin, Yumi Steins and Denise Drysdale as the hosts. And none of them had ever knew each other before that. They only met at the photo shoot, which was very tricky. We had done a camera test for the hosts, but they really didn't know each other very well at all. They'd only sort of met in an audition sort of sense and at a photo shoot. Sure. But then once we got into the studio, they were just magic together. All of them were really good talent, and they bounced off each other really, really well. And we had a lot of fun. We had a huge following, but we were so knocked out when we won. A little morning show won the most popular entertainment show. So that was fantastic. It was really good.
Oh, congratulations on that.
Thank you. Well, and the most memorable part of that is the actual night. And I'd been telling them, now if we win, because we certainly didn't expect to, you say this, you say that, I'll say that, blah, 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 blah. They announced the winner. We all looked shocked. Genuinely shocked. We got up to get the Logie and I fell up the stairs. Which no one let me forget forever. I'm still to this day, someone will go, "How'd you trip up the steps at the Logies? Thanks very much." Yeah.
Of all the things you want to be remembered
by. Oh, that's great. Yeah, thanks a lot. And now I'm telling it against myself. Good on me.
What about your Lifetime Achievement Award for the Screen Producers of Australia?
That's pretty special. That's pretty special, I must say, because I was gobsmacked that I was even considered for it, let alone, given it. So that was very nice.
Congratulations on all those. That's fantastic. Yeah. In all of that, what do you think's the most important thing you learned from it?
Gosh, that's a good question. I think learning how to get on with people. You've got to be confident in yourself that you know what you're doing. Treating people well. I've always treated people well. and I've always not had a big, fat, big head.
We just mentioned awards. You've gained a lot of recognition in the music industry. You were awarded a special award from Michael Gudinski.
I was. I really cherish those awards. I've got awards from Michael Gudinski, Sony Music and Warner Brothers as well, because when we're doing Hey Hey, we had 4 acts per show. So every record company would want to come and have their act on Hey Hey because it's power. It had huge power at the time in its heyday. An act would come on Hey Hey on a Saturday and it'd be #1 seller on a Monday morning. So everyone wanted the power of Hey Hey. Mostly it's recognition of the help I gave. I launched a lot of acts.
Would you have had a lot of pressure from people to do that?
Ooh, yes, there was. Yes.
Didn't come in the ways of brown paper packages.
No, sadly. Not a brown paper package to be seen.
But, yeah, that'd be very difficult. You could be put in a very awkward position many, many times, I would imagine.
Yes, there was a lot of pressure from people like Michael and others that wanted their act on because their act was bigger and better than anything else I might be considering for that week. But because we had 4 musical acts per show, because it was a 2-hour live show. Yeah. We were able to mix things around sometimes, and if you were coming to town then and you wanted to be on the show, then we could do that because we could put that one over there another time,
Were there any particular acts that really stood out to you over that period?
We met a lot of wonderful, wonderful people and some wonderful acts, really fantastic. The Cause came out here. Do you know The Cause?
Yes,
the Irish group? They came out on a promotional tour. Yeah. Because in those days there was a lot of promotional tours. So that there was an exposure to the audience and then they would sort of see how they went and how they were received, etc., etc. Or they would be here promoting a tour coming out in 6 months' time or something like that. So all of that would sell and get bums on seats. But the Cause came and they were just so wonderful. We did 2 live performances in one show and we liked them so much that we asked them. It never happened again and we had time as it turned out that day, but we asked them to record another song, which they did, and then we put that in the following week.
Oh, fantastic.
And so the Cause have been huge in Australia ever since. The record company was very grateful. But we did have some very good lunch, and I've got lots of photos of some very interesting times that we had at those. Yes, Sony were particularly generous and they would take out not just me but half of the office and we'd all go out and have a wonderful long lunch. But mostly we worked really long hours, so we deserved a good lunch every now and then.
Yeah, well, from what I can see, I don't know how you fitted lunch in, let alone a family.
Yeah, let alone a family, yeah, exactly.
What size staff did you have supporting you?
There was probably 5 in the production team.
Right.
Yeah. Hey Hey was unique because it was produced by Summers Carroll, being Daryl Summers and Ernie Carroll's company, for the 9 network. So they provided a lot of the staff. In other words, like the set designer was from Channel 9 and the graphics department were from Channel 9 and video department were at Channel 9, etc., etc. So the actual Summers Carroll office was reasonably small, but we used everything that we did was for Channel 9 and we were geographically close to it, so we spent a lot of time at Channel 9 as well.
Right. Okay, so of all the Hey Hey shows, was there a standout where something went particularly wrong? And was there a standout that you thought this is the best Hey Hey we've ever done?
Oh, gosh, that's a good question. I would probably need a year to think about that. The worst thing about something going wrong happened on the Don Lane show. And that was live to air. And we had this... We'd had this competition and we got thousands and thousands of entries. It was absolutely massive amount, and we had this meeting about how we're going to choose a winner. So somebody suggested then we have this big box, and then we put them all in this box, and then we lift the box into the, the flies and air up high in the studio. And then Bert was meant to sort of, knock this lock.
Right.
And the letters would all cascade down on the floor, and he'd pick one up and, there's the winner. Except that no one had quite got the volume right. There were so many letters that it was so heavy that the lock never opened. Oh. Here we are, live to air with Bert in a like a cherry picker thing with a some weapon trying to knock this lock open, refused to open because it was just jammed with the weight of the letters.
So you're on the floor there running around in circles?
I was on the floor running around in circles, just trying to work out how we're going to make this happen. So of course we went to a commercial break. Everyone ran around like fools trying to scream at each other and work out who was going to be in charge of what. Somehow we lowered it down and we, got a winner another way. But by this stage we were about 20 minutes late into the show. This had gone live to air, kept crossing back to Don, who was sort of losing his mind. Bertie was making fun of it because it wouldn't open, etc., etc. Meanwhile, out in the prop bay, there we had the RAAF live band. Right. They'd been there all day, and they were lined up outside in the prop bay, not knowing.
They were ready to come on.
They were coming on to perform.
Yep.
Meanwhile, the clock's ticking over, etc., etc. So Peter Feynman, who was the director, sort of sent a message down to me to say, drop the RAAF band. And I've gone, oh, God, strike me. They've been here all day. This is frightening. I think we got a winner by that stage, but we were so far behind, we were juggling things. And so when he told me I had to drop the band, I worked out a better way. So I ran up into the control room and said, we don't need to do that. We can shuffle it this way. And this is the one time then he actually overruled me completely and said, I said we were going to drop the band. So I had to go back outside and talk to the RAAF band, Sergeant Major man with his little, who's-he-what's-he, conductor stick, and say, I'm terribly sorry, we've had a problem on the show and we're going to have to drop you. And then he turned on me like there was no tomorrow. It was one of the worst experiences of my entire life, and I will never forget it. It was shocking. Anyway, we ended up, the show was a little bit late finishing that night.
So did the band ever come back?
No, never came back. No, wouldn't answer any calls.
And you do have danger money clause in your contract, obviously, to deal with people like this.
I should have had a lot more than I ever had at that stage.
My goodness, so that one really sticks out for you, the things that have gone wrong.
It was, I can still see it in my head.
Yeah. What about the one that's the best? Can you recall anything that really was a standout?
I guess one of the best was actually doing it live from, no, actually it wasn't live, it was recorded from Walt Disney World in Orlando.
Oh, okay.
We did 2 shows from there, which was extremely difficult, working with Disney and all of that, and it was just frightening.
In what way, Pam? Just they have contracts that you had to deal with?
The scale of Disney was unbelievable. They had invited us over there, but the people who invited us over there were sort of, it appears, never to be seen again. So when we when we got there, there were people sort of going, who are you and what do you want? And of course, we wanted to film here and film there. We'd done 2 years of talking about it.
Which program was this
trip.
for?
This is for Hey Hey.
Oh, right.
And we'd done a survey trip, and when we actually arrived and said we were going to go filming here and filming there, they were sort of like, who are you people? And then I had to go into this meeting with all these Disney executives and explain the show. And of course, they've got a host called Daryl Summers and a co-host called Aussie Ostrich, which is actually a pink ostrich that somebody shoves their arm up and then works the mouth. And then we've got another character called Pluck a Duck. And then we've got another character called Dickie Knee, which is a head on a stick. You can imagine all these Disney people are looking at me like, what planet have you come from? Because we've got Mickey Mouse and we've got Donald Duck and Minnie Mouse. We don't want your people. Go away.
Of course, yeah.
The conflict of interest with it was unbelievable.
I can see that.
I felt like we'd been thrown to the dogs because there was no one there giving us very much help. It was hard. So
how did it resolve itself?
Eventually it all...
Well, it didn't resolve itself. How did you resolve it?
Well, we ended up working our way around it and explaining, what we wanted to do and, compromise and not have Pluck a Duck anywhere near Mickey Mouse or, anything.
They still remained in the show.
They still remained in the show.
Right.
But
and the show was a success?
And the show was a success, which was great relief. Oh, dear. But I do remember there was also a competition that went with that. It was done with Qantas as well.
Oh, right.
So winners from Australia got Qantas and they got accommodation at Walt Disney World and they came along to the show. And I can remember standing, it was sort of like a mini My Music Bowl.
Right.
I can remember standing there and watching all of these winners. There were some winners, but there were also people who'd actually paid to come to Orlando to see Hey Hey. I felt the pressure of that. That was the one time I can remember being completely overwhelmed with fear that it was all going to be too much and I might let the people down. They mightn't be happy that they spent a lot of money going to, Orlando, Florida.
I can see why you enjoy that glass of wine every now and again. We've talked about difficulty and a few other things like that, Pam, but what's the hardest one you ever dealt with?
There's many, many hard and difficult things to deal with, but one that comes to mind is the... I can't speak.
And this is the morning. We haven't had anything to drink other than coffee and tea.
Degree of difficulty working with a stand-in host for Hey Hey at Saturday when you're live to air for 2 hours is up there with difficult. Right up there with difficult. So I remember we had Shirley Strawn from Skyhawks. As a stand-in host. He knew everything. He was fine. He was, he was on. He was like 100 miles an hour and he was going so fast that we were like, we'd gone through half the show well before we were meant to, and I can remember John Farnham was a guest on that show, and I got John and I literally threw him and said, just go in there and talk because we just need to have some,
This is what you do,
yes,
stretch it out.
We need to stretch it out because otherwise the show would have finished about, 1.5 hours instead of 2 hours. So it was that was difficult. There were a few others that were challenging, and that was very much, heart in your mouth time getting through that because they didn't know the show. I didn't know them for a 2-hour live situation. So they're challenging.
What about the old axiom about never work with kids or animals?
But we did have both.
So did it turn out to be true?
No. The kids that we dealt with, they were all fine. They didn't have any problems. I don't think, and I can't remember any.
The one young kid that came on that I recall did a take-off of Brian Nankervis.
Yes.
What was his...
Raymond J. Bartholomew and the little boy, Matt Healy. He was gorgeous, really lovely. In fact, when you said children, he certainly came to mind. The other one was a little boy called Nathan Cavalieri who had cancer and he wanted to meet Mark Knopfler.
Right. And you're a friend of Mark Knopfler?
No, the Today Show actually ended up sending him over to England and he met Mark Knopfler and that was fantastic. He became a bit of a mini superstar and he appeared on Hey Hey many, many times. And he played with B.B. King on Hey Hey. Oh, he was just fantastic. Tommy Emmanuel, lots of really famous, musicians and things. And he was amazing.
Pam, we've talked mainly about live television, which has kept you on your toes most of your life, but there are also pre-recorded shows that you do as well. What's the difference in handling those and how did you find them different?
They are different beasts, as you say, because normally you record a week's worth in one hit. So one day you have Land of Family Feud, for instance, which I did 2 lots of, did it with Bert Newton and Grant Denyer, but you record 5 days worth in one day. You've got to have everything in a row, as with any show, but it's more of a, churning them out like sausages. You stick to a format, and so it's not as loosey-goosey as the others, live to air.
Even though they're pre-recorded, they usually have an audience.
Yeah, we had audiences, yep.
Yeah. During the production of that show, might you get to a stage where someone will say, cut or stop, let's do that again? Does that happen?
Oh, yeah, that happens. Yes,
right.
Absolutely. Because, when you're doing something like a quiz show, people can say things that were inappropriate. We'd have to stop tape and start again, just to keep everything clean and above board for it. And we did have, audiences in the studio, so, had to keep them entertained the whole way through. So we'd have questions for 5 shows.
Right.
We'd survey questions with the live audience.
Right.
And then they'd be used in another show down the track.
Okay.
So the audience was sort of served a couple of purposes.
I see.
But you'd have a lot of people, you'd have lots of contestants, so you'd have a machine sort of turning everything over and keeping all the wheels going so that when that show's finished, they go home. See you, lovely to see you, goodbye, get out. Next. So they're very different, but very enjoyable too. Very enjoyable. Both of those shows have a lot of humour and everything.
A little less stress too.
Yes, exactly. I also did Sale of the Century, and that's sort of a bit more pressure because you have to have the right answer with that. And if anyone disputes an answer, in those days you'd have to run up to the control room and get out the Encyclopedia Britannica.
And people did dispute answers, did they?
They disputed answers, stop tape, because somebody said that, gave a different answer and then would tell you that they're right, so you had to go and prove them wrong.
What advice, if any, would you give to someone starting out now, entering into a career like yours?
Well, it's very different now because there are courses that people do. They do media courses and they supposedly learn how to do these things and, get little pieces of paper that say they've qualified. And so the television that we did doesn't really exist. Very little live to air, variety, comedy. Just about everything is pre-recorded with the occasional things like the Actor Awards or the Logies or things like that that are done live or, slight delay or sort of whatever. So if I was giving advice to anyone, I would sort of say, learn what you can, but then learn as much as you can once you actually get a job on the job, because coming into a production and thinking you know how it works, the two don't meet, because very different from learning in a book or sort of something to actually being on a studio floor, and you've got a lot of people to deal with. One of the biggest things is to be able to work with people and get everybody on your side to help you, and everything has got to be organised within an inch of its life. It has to be.
Got to go like clockwork. And this is why you would have producers' meetings prior to a show. And everyone turned up on time and came along, did they?
Yes, absolutely they did, yes. You have a meeting before every show to talk it through. And
that surprised me. I thought you were going to say, oh no, that was a difficult time just getting people together.
The very first shows I worked on were IMT with Graham Kennedy. He didn't come to those meetings.
And didn't follow scripts and things either, did he? Or directions.
Didn't do well.
If I can remember, destroyed lots of ads. One of their favourite advertisers, the footwear company, Raoul Merton. And he used to say, if they're foul, they're Raoul. If they're hurting, they're Merton. I'm going, what?
That's right.
It must make things so much more difficult to work with people that are off script all the time.
Well, yes, that's where you've really got to be on your toes and sort of follow the bouncing ball and hope to get to the end.
You've been out of that industry now for a little while. Mm-hmm. Do you miss it?
I do miss it. I miss the people. I miss being with mostly younger people, I suppose. I just enjoy the conversations and the fun and, all of that.
You must still get together and do...
Oh, I've got friends from every show I've ever worked on.
Oh,
still
fantastic.
to this day.
I tried to get onto being a friend of yours on Facebook at one stage, and you had 802 friends on Facebook. I felt a little insignificant.
But you were welcomed.
Yes, thank you very much. Now, you spend your time with your daughters and your grandchildren.
I do.
Probably your training as a producer really helps out in that situation. I can imagine juggling time around babysitting and doing all sorts of things, picking them up and delivering them.
Yeah, I do all of that. I'm on call.
Things like that.
Which is nice.
To fill in all this time you have between your grandchildren, you play mahjong.
I do.
And you play another game called Patong. What got you into Patong?
Well, as most people know, I live quite close to the Petanque Club. Well, I'd take the dog for a walk every day, and quite often I would sort of go past on a Saturday and see people playing, and some very nice people, I can't remember exactly who it was, saw me looking over the fence and said, come in and have a look and, join us. And so I was encouraged to come along and play, and I did, and I was happily, received by people, and I've been turning up ever since. It's been really, really enjoyable.
And the club's far better off for it too.
Oh, thank you, that's nice.
Pam, that's just been fantastic. What an interesting and exciting life that's been. We've only just touched on a little bit of it, so we might have you back to get into some more sort of details in a later program. Thank you very much for coming along. I'm sure our listener will enjoy it and no end.
Thank you, Rex. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. Outtake 14.
Clear as mud, isn't it?
This is good. How about stage shows and drama? Is that different again? I'm starting to wish I hadn't done this now.
Yes, in
Is there a difference between drama and stage shows now?
yes. Yes, it is.
God, you're hopeless. Oh, dear.
I think we're
I
going
said to Kat, I won't be long. This will take 5 minutes. What about...
It'll make me stop laughing.
God. Well, how professional was that? Leave the phone on. Now there was a girl on a mission, just like that graceful swan swimming upstream, so calm and serene on the top, but paddling like crazy to keep it all afloat underneath. And we only touched the surface. We didn't even get to her trip around Uluru on a Harley-Davidson motorbike. Why don't you ask her about that one? As we fade out to the sounds of Max Thomas on the Conga drums, I thank you for joining us here at universalexports.co. Tune in a fortnight's time to meet our next guest, who will amaze and enthrall you with his engrossing story to tell. Rex out.